now available in paperback and e-readers. Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess. The goddess next door takes on the threat of a deadly digital diva driven to destroy the world in this action-packed, all-new Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess featuring a bonus pin-up and the other 2 books in the Cyber Goddess saga at online bookstores everywhere today. You often hear many of these comic book YouTubers going on about these social justice warriors who they believe are hurting the comic book industry. Now, when I take a critical examination of many of these comic book YouTubers these days who continue to complain about these social justice warriors, they really don't see how they're doing as much harm as they allege the social justice warriors are doing to comics. Now, I believe that many of these comic book YouTubers in the beginning thought they were doing the right thing by talking about how bad things were in the comic book industry as related to the poor quality work produced by these people they allege were social justice warriors. But in recent years, all of this complaining has gotten so bad, it's just really counterproductive at this point. And I believe that many of the comic book YouTubers really don't understand how they've gotten themselves caught up in a vicious cycle. And that vicious cycle is one where the social justice warriors have gotten leverage over them because they continue to react to the kinds of content that they put out instead of responding in a constructive manner. Because what's happening now is many of the comic YouTubers are entering into a codependent cycle where they go out here and react to whatever shenanigans or whatever comments that these social justice warriors post online. And many of them react by making these videos, and because these videos get lots of views, that gives them more incentive to make videos about what the social justice warriors are doing instead of going out here and making efforts to promote good comics. And that is one of the reasons why the whole Comicsgate movement got compromised, because many of the comics YouTubers were so caught up in going back and forth with these what they call SJW comic creators that they practically ignored lots of great comics and lots of great indie projects and lots of great Kickstarters and Indiegogos for great projects. As many of these creators have come out here putting together some absolutely fantastic work, we have not heard from many of the comic YouTubers making efforts to promote the work that many great comic pros are putting out here. Really solid comics, well-written comics, well-crafted comics. Many of these comics have been ignored by your popular comic YouTubers while they just sit there and complain about SJWs and how SJWs are destroying the industry. Well, the great irony is that many of the comic YouTubers are also helping in the destruction of the comic book industry by participating in this vicious cycle where they go back and forth with many of these social justice warriors. Because many of these who they allege to be social justice warriors, many of these people, like they allege, they say they don't want to be here, and many of those people, what they want to get is attention for themselves on social media by making statements, and they go out here and get that attention from comics YouTubers who add fuel to their fire by reacting and making videos to whatever outrageous statements that these people make. Now, one of the big problems that happens with many comic YouTubers is that they believe that the SJWs have the leverage because they are working at companies that feature many of their favorite characters. Now, Marvel and DC Comics are a place where many comic fans like myself grew up with these characters, And many of us grew up enjoying the adventures of those characters. And many of the comics YouTubers, because they have an emotional attachment to these characters, they really take it personal when they hear these social justice warriors going on about certain political beliefs, or they hear them doing things with characters that they grew up loving. And these people use that as leverage to go out here and get people emotional, get people riled up. And many of these people, they get off on the fact that they're getting attention by doing these things to these characters. It's just like a high school or junior high school bully. Once he sees that you like something, they go out here and look to get your attention by tearing down what you love. But any smart person who sees that kind of behavior, they know the best way to deal with a social justice warrior who wants to get attention like this is to disengage. Because once you disengage and you stop caring, then that person no longer has leverage over you, and they cannot use something to go out here and have a way to get you to react and get a way to get you to respond like a puppet. Because the comics YouTubers, they have been responding like puppets, reacting with every jerk that these social justice warriors make. And many of these people, they think that they're having power, but the great irony is they're not really having the impact they believe, because as they go back and forth in this vicious cycle, this does not really impact the sales at the companies that many of the comics YouTubers have the biggest issue with, Marvel and DC Comics. I mean, many of these people who are going in the back and forth, this is not really helping their sales, and it's not really helping the sales of many of what they call the SJW books. Because as somebody who has 20 years of publishing experience and 10 years running his own imprint, I can tell you the ultimate goal of a publisher at the end of the day is sales. Your ultimate goal when you are going out here producing publications is to generate enough sales, because 90% of the books you publish are going to fail, and you need that 10% of books to go out here and cover the cost of the 90. So every time you see a social justice warrior going back and forth with a comics YouTuber, if you're a publisher, you're going to go out here and look at that person and say, this person is a liability to me. And I know that your Disney and your Discovery Time Warner have big pockets, but eventually they're going to reach a point where they're going to say, this division is not as profitable as it should be. And that's when they're really going to start cutting titles. Because again, at the end of the day, your job is to generate sales, and your job is to make sure your book is selling enough units that it does not get cut from the catalog. And when you have these social justice warriors who are spending their time on Twitter talking about politics or talking about these things to offend people or try to rile people up, that's not good for business. And we don't hear many of the people in comics YouTube talking about what's good for business. Now, what's good for the comics business is people going out here and reading and recommending great books, because when we go out here and read and recommend great books, that leads to sales going up. And when sales go up, guess what? That means that the American comic business is in better competitive shape, and it's a much stronger business. Unfortunately, we have too many people in the social justice warriors section of social media looking for social clout, and we have many comics YouTubers looking for social clout, because both groups are looking to get likes and views, but likes and views at the end of the day do not generate sales. No, what generates sales is what's on your page, and if what's on your page is not appealing to readers, then it's really bad for business, because according to the comics YouTubers, these people are all about agenda, but you can't push an agenda in a book that is barely getting 8,000 orders, and because in the publishing business, a book with 8,000 orders only gets about maybe 4,000-5,000 sales. And if you're getting 4,000 or 5,000 sales, that means your book is taking a loss. And 4,000 or 5,000 people at the end of the day, that's not even an apartment building here in New York City. And when you have a multi-billion-dollar company like your Discovery, Time Warner, and Disney selling 5,000 comics, that's an embarrassment, especially when you consider the wealth and value of these intellectual properties at Marvel and DC Comics. And what's even making things less valuable is that many of these social justice warriors and these comic book YouTubers continue to participate in this vicious cycle of back and forth with each other, because this back and forth, yes, it generates a lot of controversy on Twitter, and it generates a lot of views on YouTube, but it does not go out here and sell Marvel or DC comics and keep many comic shops open. No, what keeps comic shops open are having a catalog of quality comics, and as I see it, many people who watch comics YouTube need to understand that comics are not just Marvel and DC comics. No, comics is a medium, and it's an art form, and there are many other great creators out here producing many great books, and these great books, sadly, have been ignored by most of your comics YouTube as they continue on in this unproductive back and forth. Now, your Comicsgate, again, they said their original mission was getting good comics in the hands of readers, but we haven't heard many of them talk about many good comics in the last 2 or 3 years. No, it's all been about your social justice warriors, identity politics, and this whole argument about those topics has turned into an obsession as I see it. I mean, I've made more videos recommending comics than many of the comics YouTubers in the last year as I see it. I mean, when I go out here, I spend Patreon money and PayPal and Cash App donations I get from viewers to go out here and support other indie creators. And then as I spend that money, I oftentimes go out here and make videos about those comics so that those comic creators can go out here and get their books discovered by other readers. Because I really know, as a publisher, I know how hard it is to go out here and get this money together for a project, and I know that good word of mouth can go out here and go a long way to taking a creator's work to the next level. So that's one of the reasons why I would go out here and talk about a lot of great books, because I want readers to go out here and pick up many of these fantastic books like companies like Concrete Comics are producing right now, and other independent creators are producing right now, like with Tyler Martin and his Antagonist, Raymond Leonard with Agent Solo, the creators of the Sister Mercy comic, the creator of Goth Ghost Girl. I mean, again, so many great comics, and even DC right now has been putting together a fantastic run on Nightwing. But where are the videos talking about all of those great books? I mean, we got more videos talking about how manga is beating comics, but we're not talking about all of the great work many independent creators are doing right now. I mean, nobody's really in the comic book YouTube sector talking about many of the great books out here, and nobody's really talking about, getting many of these creators the support that they need to get their Kickstarters funded and to get their books sometimes to the point where they can get funded. Because I've seen some Kickstarters that were on the brink of getting funded, and with the little bit of support from comic book YouTubers, that book was able to get over, but we don't see it from the big comic book YouTubers who want to sit here and complain about SJWs being in comic book jobs and not wanting to be there. Now, according to their argument, many of those people, again, are just looking for clout on social media, and they're looking to use comics as a springboard towards entering into Hollywood. Well, as somebody who has been studying the entertainment industry and is a screenwriter, I can tell you that comics is not the way to get into the entertainment industry, because the whole thing you want to do with a script is you want to get a script sold. And the way you get a script sold is through an agent, and you get an agent by producing quality contacts, one, and then going out here and producing quality work. And many of the agents, they would rather deal with a straight screenplay because it means a higher commission for them, because if they have to go through an adaptation for a property, that's not really a deal they want to do. I mean, yes, some of these people do get options from Netflix, but an option is nothing at the end of the day when you deal with the entertainment business. An option means somebody bought a property for a minute and they're trying to find the financing to get it. So you may get $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 and maybe $50,000 at the top of the deal, but at the end of the day, you're going to miss out on a 7-figure deal, because usually many of the projects that get bought and for greenlight, you get 1, 2, 3% of that production budget. If you get $100 million production budget, that means out of 1%, that means you're getting 10% at the most, or 1.3 million. And no, again, an agent doesn't want to go out here and deal with somebody who has a comic and that barely has an audience. No, they want to see if this property is viable. So somebody coming to them and saying, oh, I'm a social justice warrior who worked at Marvel and I got a comic with 8,000 sales, that agent laughs at that, because that's not going to be able to ensure that they can get a green light deal. No, you have to come in there with 100,000 sales, 200,000 sales, 300,000 sales. That means that there's an audience for that property. And when you've got 100, 200, 300,000 sales, that means when they go out here, there's less risk for them when they go out here and make adaptation of said property. So the social justice warrior who creates the covert contract like that, using social media to gain clout and trying to use comics, they're basically wasting their time. And again, the comics YouTubers going back and forth with them is a waste of time, because this guy is going to go nowhere in the entertainment business, because no agent wants to spend time on dealing with a guy like this. I mean, yeah, you might get 1 or 2 small D or E-list agents who will deal with that type of deal, but that deal's not going to get any traction. And even worse, that property is practically over at the end of the day. And the reason why that property is over is because once you go out here and sign an option for a property, that means that the studio has already read the treatment for that project, and that means it's practically over. It means it's been passed around through the different studios, and they're not really interested. You really don't want to be at that point with the studios. No, you want to be in a place where you can go out there and say, I've got the sales, we've got an audience, and if you invest in this, we're going to make a lot of money. And again, the social justice warrior, they're trying to use comics as a springboard, and they're going nowhere. And the comic book YouTubers, they're sitting there arguing with these people, not understanding they're going nowhere either, because the more you go back and forth with that person on social media, the more you are going nowhere. And this is also affecting your mental health, because you sitting there going back and forth with this individual, this is affecting your mind, because instead of you seeing the big panoramic picture as related to the comic book industry, all you do is fixate on social justice warriors and what they are saying on social media. Well, there is more to the comic book world than social justice warriors, and there is more to the world than social media. And more because there's more to the world, there's more to the world than whatever alleged SJW comic book writer says. And if you don't like their projects, then you can just go out here and not buy them. That has more of an impact on anything than complaining about these people, because again, this is a business, and if these people are not producing product you like, the way you send a message to them is by not buying their products and going out and buying other products. I mean, yes, I know a lot of people have an emotional attachment to Marvel and DC characters, and many Marvel and DC characters helped me get through a lot of rough days when I was being bullied in junior high school and long-term periods of unemployment. But I also understand that if I love comics, I want to help out many of those other small independent creators and artists out there so that this medium can survive for the next generation. So for me, I would rather just take my precious time in my life not complaining about Marvel and DC, because Marvel and DC are not comic books, and Marvel and DC, if they don't want to change, then there's not much I can do about them. Yes, these social justice warriors, as people allege, are getting jobs in that business at Marvel and DC, but they do not control the American comic book business. No, the American comic book business and the American comic book medium can go out here and survive if it goes out here and supports many of the indie creators. And I believe that the indie creators are going to be the future of the business, because as people get older, those characters that we grew up with, the Thor, Iron Man, Captain America, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, they are going to become less popular because your younger kids don't know who these characters are, and they know who many of the manga characters are. And many of those younger kids, they're looking for new characters to be their heroes, and that's where the money really is. I mean, when you look at the bigger picture, you look at it and say, yes, I love those characters, but I want to go out here and create something that will be the next big character for the next generation. And again, there's a big ground floor for everybody to get on, and that's why you see so many guys out here making comic book Indiegogos and Kickstarters, because they're making the next big property. And I would rather go out here and promote some of the really great books that have been coming to the marketplace, because with that competition in the indies, we are seeing a lot of great content coming to the marketplace. We're seeing absolutely fantastic books with really great stories, really great art coming to the marketplace, and they're coming from independent creators who your Marvel and DC rejected and turned down. And now that many of those people realize that they can generate wealth with their own intellectual property, they are not going out here to go out here and be a part of the Marvel and DC bandwagon. And again, complaining about Marvel and DC does not make them change. It may get many of the comic YouTubers views, but it does not get readers to go out here and pick up comics. And that's something that I want to try to turn the tide on. I really want to get people more focused on absolutely great books, because absolutely great books are out here. Absolutely fantastic books are being produced, and I would rather people focus on the positive, because that's better for your health when you sit here and read positive books, and it makes you radiate positive energy once you start reading this kind of media. I mean, complaining about the SJW does not change anything. Yes, these people are on the job right now, but they won't be on the job for long, because agendas don't generate profits and businesses run for profit. So at the end of the day, complaining about these people isn't going to make them go anywhere, because the only way for them to go anywhere is if you walk away. And the faster you walk away from your comic book YouTube channels where they're just complaining about how bad the business is, the better it will be for you, because these kind of channels, they're really, as I see it, bad for your mental health, and they're bad for your perception of reality, because they just keep complaining about these bad parts of the business but not focusing on all of the good work that is out here. Because again, if your Comicsgate was about change, we're not really seeing them talk about change. We see them getting caught up in this vicious cycle where they're continuing to go back and forth with these so-called SJW comic pros, and them going back and forth is turning into a vicious cycle that is just that drives people straight down the drain, because it gets tiring hearing about all the complaining about what this one did on Twitter or what this one said on Twitter. I mean, it's so junior high school. It doesn't really help the business, and it really does not help get books in readers' hands. No, what gets books in readers' hands is good word of mouth, and where we're not seeing a lot of good word of mouth on Comics YouTube, because many of these guys get more views roasting up social justice warriors, and social justice warriors has become an obsession for them. And I don't want it to become an obsession for me. I would rather, again, go out here and spend money on good books and help good creators, and help creators get their work to the marketplace and help them reach a larger audience. I mean, if we really care about comics, that's going to show through our actions. And the actions of someone who cares about comics is they're going to start talking about all the great books out there and helping new readers find all of those great titles. Now, my first comic, Esteem No Good Deed, is available on Kindle for 99 cents. And if you want to try out the first comic I did, Esteem No Good Deed, with art by Bill Walko, you can find it on Amazon's Kindle for 99 cents. And if you want to try some of my other SJS direct publications, like the ISIS series, the Esteem series, the John Haynes series, the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, the Thetas, A Recipe for Success, or many of my men's issues books like Stop Simpin' and The Man Crisis, you can find those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. And if you want to see me make more videos about comics, or help me continue to raise funds for my upcoming comic, John Haynes at Death's Door, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the link in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available on Kindle, Esteem No Good Deed. The Devil's Divas scare some stick-up kids straight in this action-packed Esteem series comic. Get Esteem No Good Deed on Kindle for 99 cents today.